Deep within the ancient city of Elis, a heavy iron bolt slides home, sealing the fate of the world's greatest warriors. This was the Chamber of Silence, a place where the air itself felt heavy with the weight of unspoken discipline. They were locked away from the world, and more importantly, they were locked away from the touch of women. 10 days of absolute silence, 10 days of total retention, the secret to a power that could move mountains. Why did the most feared men of antiquity believe that one night of pleasure would cost them their glory? To the ancient Greeks, semen was not merely a reproductive fluid, it was the concentrated essence of a man's very soul. Aristotle called it vital heat, a fire that transformed common blood into the fuel of champions and kings. He argued that the male body concocted this seed from blood through intense internal heat, creating a reservoir of power. Every release was seen as a leakage of that heat, a physical diminishment of one's ability to compete at an elite level. The Pythagoreans went further, whispering that this seed was a drop of the brain itself, the source of genius. Under this framework, ejaculation was a literal drain on the nervous system, a fog that clouded the mind and weakened the resolve. The physician Aristeas believed that retention allowed the seed to circulate back into the body, supercharging every muscle. This recycled energy was thought to harden the frame, sharpen the senses, and ironize the warrior's spirit for the kill. They viewed their seed as biological wealth, something to be hoarded, guarded, and invested only in the fires of the arena. Consider Milo of Croton, the man who carried a bull. His strength was built on a foundation of absolute iron discipline. He knew that to dominate the stadium, he first had to dominate his own base instincts and primal, wandering desires. He consumed 20 pounds of meat a day, a fuel needed to sustain the vital heat that retention had stoked within him. As a pupil of Pythagoras, Milo understood that physical power was inseparable from spiritual and sexual self-mastery. Every athlete was forced into the month of Elis, 30 days of brutal training under the watchful eyes of the judges. They arrived not as celebrities, but as candidates for a higher state of existence, leaving their lives behind. The Hellenodikai, the judges, were masters of discipline, ensuring that no man wavered in his commitment to purity. Their authority was absolute. To defy the Hellenodikai was to invite the wrath of the gods themselves. In the Xystos, they ran until their lungs burned, pushing past the limits of mortal endurance. In the Tetragono, they wrestled in the heavy sand, testing the strength they had hoarded through weeks of restraint. Failure was not an option. The Mastigophoroi stood ready to lash any man who showed a moment of weakness. The Hellenodikai evaluated their arete, the divine excellence that only a pure, disciplined body could contain. Women were strictly banished. Their presence was a temptation that could leak the masculine power from an athlete's veins. Even the sight of a woman was thought to trigger a miasma, a religious pollution that could rot an athlete's potential. They practiced infibulation, a physical lock to prevent even the thought of arousal from taking hold of the mind. This leather bond was a constant reminder that his seed belonged to the games, and his body was a temple of war. Aristeas taught that the seed was a cerebrospinal substance, a drop of the very light that governed the mind. By retaining it, the athlete was literally feeding his brain, sharpening his focus into a razor-sharp edge. To expend it was to court stupidity and slow the reflexes, a fatal mistake in the split-second world of the arena. The trainers sought to cultivate a divine fury, an unchanneled aggression that grew with every day of abstinence. Sexual energy, denied its natural outlet, was transmuted into a violent, focused power ready to be unleashed in the arena. They were like coiled springs compressed by frustration and purified by the fire of their own contained energy. By the 10th day of total isolation, the athletes were vibrating with a tension that few mortals could ever hope to endure. The Greeks believed this retained power made a man a magnet, not just for victory, but for a terrifying level of attraction. It was the power of the unspent man, a raw, primal allure that commanded respect from men and awe from women. It was a glow of the skin and a fire in the eyes that signaled a man was in total, absolute control of his biology. Their bodies became efficient machines, purging all waste and retaining only the purest essence of their life force. The thick beard, fed by the vital seed, was the physical manifestation of a man's untamed and focused power. Iccus of Tarentum, the great pentathlete, never touched another person during his entire grueling training cycle. Plato noted his legendary self-control, calling him a man who conquered himself before he ever conquered his rivals. Cleomachus of Thebes was so dedicated that he would flee the room if the conversation turned to the subject of sex. He guarded his eyes as fiercely as he guarded his seed, knowing that even a single thought could begin the drain. Modern historians note that the ancient athletic body was seen as highly precarious, a balance of power and fragility. It was at its peak only when all inputs were perfectly balanced and all sexual outputs were strictly controlled. The true power of the 10-day lock may have been the psychological dominance it granted the athlete over his own mind. Knowing you have sacrificed what other men cannot gives you a confidence that borders on the divine. On the journey to Olympia, they stopped at the Fountain of Piera for final purification rituals. The sacred way was a 58-kilometer march through the dark heart of Greece toward the sanctuary of Zeus. By the time they reached the Altis, the athletes were no longer mere men. They were vessels of unspent godly power. Their bodies were charged with months of preserved vitality, a battery of force waiting for the signal to explode. They swore an oath to Zeus that they had followed the laws of the lock and that their strength was pure. Muhammad Ali reportedly abstained for 6 weeks before a fight, believing it gave him an edge of raw, primal power. In the modern octagon, warriors still whisper about the benefits of retention, a bridge to an ancient state of being. Mike Tyson famously claimed 5 years of abstinence during his rise, a lock that fueled his legendary ferocity. Coaches still enforce no-sex rules before major matches, echoing the ancient belief in the link between retention and power. Modern science has largely debunked the physiological necessity of this ancient, grueling practice. Studies show that sexual activity has no negative effect on physical strength or endurance the following day. And yet the belief remains, because for the elite, the game is played as much in the head as in the muscles. If you believe your power is tied to your seed, then for you it truly is. Perception becomes the ultimate reality. It is a primal archetype, the belief that to achieve the extraordinary one must sacrifice the ordinary comforts. The man who can say no to his body can say yes to immortality. This is the true lock of Elis. Was it biological or was it purely psychological? In the heat of the arena, the difference didn't matter. The result was the same. Men who were more than men, forged in the silence of their own restraint. The power was in the restraint, the glory was in the lock, and the man who held both was godlike. Will you find your own lock, or will you let your power bleed into the dust? The choice is yours. If you felt the weight of this ancient power, hit that like button to show your resolve and strength. Subscribe now and join us as we dive deeper into the shadows of history and the secrets of the greats. Support our journey through history by hitting the thanks button. It keeps our fire burning and our stories alive. Every contribution helps us bring these forgotten truths to light. Thank you for standing with us in the shadows. Hippocrates taught that semen was the very foam of the blood, synthesized from the strongest particles of every organ. From the nails to the hair, every part of the body sent its essence through the veins to the brain. This path of pangenesis meant that to lose the seed was to lose a part of every tissue that made a man whole. Galen later linked this seed to pneuma, the vital spirit, the very breath of life that animates the mortal frame. It carried the psychic pneuma from the brain and the vital pneuma from the heart, a carrier of the soul's frequency. In the gymnasium of Elis, this theory was put to the ultimate test under the punishing Greek sun. The Hellenodici watched every move, their forked switches ready to strike any man who showed signs of lethargy. They forced training in the midday heat, a crucible designed to burn away the weak and refine the remaining pneuma. The early Olympians lived on a humble diet of fresh cheese and barley bread, maintaining a simple, focused purity. But as the meat revolution took hold, wrestlers began consuming beef and pork to match the mass of the animals they sought to mimic. Jumpers ate the meat of the goat, believing they could ingest the animal's legendary leaping ability through its flesh. Sweet cakes and cold water were forbidden. The internal heat of the body had to be kept at a high, constant simmer. Milo of Croton reportedly washed his 20 pounds of meat down with 18 pints of wine, a feat of inhuman scale. The kinodesm served as more than a lock. It was a physical vow, a leather barrier against the leakage of destiny. It protected against the indecency of exposure during nude exercise. But more importantly, it shielded the athlete's intent. At the Fountain of Piera, the smoke of sacrifice carried their final prayers for victory into the dark, watching sky. The 36-mile march along the sacred way was a slow, rhythmic transition from the world of men to the world of legends. They passed the Zanes, statues of Zeus built from the finds of cheaters, a silent warning that there are no shortcuts to Arete. Arriving at the Altes, they were no longer training. They were concocting the final explosive reaction of their preserved spirit. When the signal sounded, that months-long lock was finally broken, releasing a tide of power that would echo for centuries. The pentathletes, who required the most diverse range of power, were the ultimate symbols of this retained explosive energy. Victory was not just a prize. It was a holy demonstration that the spirit had successfully conquered the weaknesses of the flesh. Even today, the shadows of Elis linger. From Muhammad Ali to the modern octagon, the myth of retention persists. It is a primal archetype, the belief that to achieve the extraordinary, one must sacrifice the ordinary comforts. The man who can say no to his body can say yes to immortality. This is the true lock of Elis. Was it biological, or was it purely psychological? In the heat of the arena, the difference didn't matter. The result was the same: men who were more than men, forged in the silence of their own restraint. The power was in the restraint, the glory was in the lock, and the man who held both was godlike. Will you find your own lock, or will you let your power bleed into the dust? The choice is yours. If you felt the weight of this ancient power, hit that like button to show your resolve and strength. Subscribe now and join us as we dive deeper into the shadows of history and the secrets of the greats. Support our journey through history by hitting the thanks button. It keeps our fire burning and our stories alive. Every contribution helps us bring these forgotten truths to light. Thank you for standing with us in the shadows. In the silence of retention, the body becomes a battery, storing the potential energy of 1,000 future generations. The pepsis, or internal cooking of the blood, requires a heat that only the most disciplined warriors can sustain. As the seed is reabsorbed, it binds to the muscle fibers, turning soft flesh into the density of hardened bronze. The reflexes are sharpened, the nerves steeled, and the mind cleared of the clutter of base, wandering desire. Every hour of isolation in Elis was an investment in the divine Arete that would be displayed in the stadium of Zeus. The switches of the Hellanodikai were not for pain, but for the removal of the ego, the final barrier to greatness. They marched with the weight of their own contained power, a physical pressure that felt like the presence of a god. The lighting of the flame was the signal that the containment was over, and the transmutation of energy could begin. In the struggle of the heavy events, every ounce of hoarded vital heat was converted into the force of a bull's charge. The victor stood as a living proof that the lock of Elis was not a sacrifice, but a liberation of the highest human potential. Even today, in the quiet moments before a fight, the same ancient laws are whispered in the gyms of the elite. Ali knew that the power came from within, that the seed of a man was the fuel of a champion's fire. The ferocity of the young Tyson was born in the years of abstinence, a contained aggression that shattered every rival. The modern warrior seeks the same edge, the bridge between the biology of the animal and the spirit of the god. Science may call it a myth, but for those who have felt the transformation, the data is in the results of the arena. A man in total control of his biology is a man who can dictate the terms of his own destiny and the world's respect. Across 3 millennia, the arena remains the same, a place where the internal fire is judged by the external result. The lock is a state of mind, a perception of power that becomes the reality of the champion's unshakable confidence. It is the call of the archetype, the demand that you sacrifice the comfort of today for the immortality of tomorrow. The lock of Elis is open to any man who has the courage to turn the key and seal his own destiny in stone. If you felt the call of this ancient power, hit that like button to show your resolve and join the brotherhood of the lock. Support our journey through history by hitting the thanks button. It keeps our fire burning and our stories alive. Every contribution helps us bring these forgotten truths to light. Thank you for standing with us in the shadows.